Just so you know, this show is about scary stuff. So don't say I didn't warn you guys. And remember, don't be scared.
Episode 111, Officer Down. War Baby here with another episode of Murderous Minors. November 6th, 2021 marked 5 years since the on-duty death of West Valley City, Utah police officer Cody Brotherson. So this week on Murderous Minors, we look at his case of a cop killed by kids, or teenagers to be more accurate. This week, we'll look at this case, and next week, we'll look at a couple other cases that have occurred since Officer Brotherson was killed. 25-year-old Cody Brotherson, the oldest of 3 brothers, was born and raised in West Valley City, Utah, and had joined the WVCPD in 2013 when he was 22 years old. By late 2016, the known prankster had already earned accolades from the U.S. State's Attorney for Utah in his 3 short years on the force. The trouble began around 3:15 a.m. on Sunday, November 6, 2016, when an undercover officer spotted a silver BMW with Florida license plates disabled in the middle of an intersection. As the officer drove to the car and turned on his hazard lights, he observed several individuals walking away from the vehicle and toward the Boulder Pines apartment complex. He saw 3 teens get into a Honda Accord and start it, exiting the parking lot before driving back toward the disabled BMW, where a second officer had already responded and was laying down a spike strip designed to damage tires when driven over. The undercover officer took pursuit as the stolen car gunned it. Just a bit further up the road, Officer Brotherson had also joined in on the attempted apprehension, and as the stolen vehicle approached him, the undercover officer still following behind reported that he saw the car swerve directly at the officer. Brotherson was struck at approximately 80 miles per hour and was likely killed on impact while standing about 50 yards away from his patrol car to deploy a second set of spike strips. His death was the first and has been the only fatality of a West Valley City police officer since the department's formation in 1980. Officer Brotherson left behind not only his parents and 2 younger brothers plus extended family and friends, but also a fiancée, who recalled at his memorial how quickly they had fallen in love. She called him loyal, honest, and goofy, and recalled his love of movies and his new mustache, which he had named Wilson, like the volleyball from the film Castaway. His partner recalled looking up to him, although he was the senior officer. When family members viewed his body before his funeral, only a small portion of the right side of his face was exposed and able to be touched, as the rest of Officer Brotherson's body had been covered, to keep his family from seeing the devastation being hit by a fast-moving car had done to the man they loved. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, accepted by his 2 younger brothers. After striking and killing the officer, the stolen Honda Accord next struck a fire hydrant, then traveled down an embankment and struck a fence, after which everyone inside the car fled. The 3 teens were apprehended quickly with the help of a law enforcement helicopter and were determined to be an unidentified 15-year-old boy, Lawrence Boggs, who had only been 14 years old for about a month, and his slightly older brother Christopher Boggs, who had just turned 15 a day and a half earlier, on November 4th. When interviewed, Lawrence Boggs eventually told police that they used a spoon to start the Honda and steal it, saying that their unidentified friend was the driver. Boggs had said at first that the three of them had been in the back seat and that a fourth person had been driving the car when it struck Officer Brotherson. The unidentified friend had also claimed that there had been a fourth person driving, however, admitted that wasn't true, but wouldn't say which one of the three of them had actually been in control of the vehicle. Newly 15-year-old Christopher Boggs wouldn't speak to police, and investigators never conclusively determined who the driver had been, even though they meticulously photographed the suspects over the 10 days following their arrests in order to determine if bruise patterns could tell them who had been sitting where. The Boggs brothers had pretty extensive juvenile records for their young ages with recent activity, each having been arrested for criminal activity just 2 days earlier, on Christopher Boggs' 15th birthday. Each was charged with receiving more than $5,000 in stolen goods, with Christopher also being charged with aggravated assault, possession of burglary tools, and possession of a dangerous weapon by a minor. The trio, armed with at least a knife and a set of brass knuckles, had reportedly gone to a McDonald's to target gang members for a robbery, eventually fleeing that scene in a stolen car. 14-year-old Lawrence Boggs, a freshman at Eisenhower Junior High School, had also been charged with aggravated assault a little more than a week before this arrest for his participation in a different gang fight, bringing the total charges on his juvenile record to 4 felonies and 7 misdemeanors, and 6 appearances in juvenile court. Freshly 15-year-old Christopher Boggs, also a freshman at Eisenhower Junior High School, had a total of 4 felonies and 5 misdemeanors on his juvenile record by then, and had been before a juvenile court judge 3 times in the past. Their 15-year-old friend, a freshman at Granger High School, had 4 felonies and 3 misdemeanors. For killing Officer Brotherson, the Boggs brothers and their friend were all charged with felony first-degree murder with gang enhancements and car theft with gang enhancements, both Class 1 felonies, as well as failing to stop at the command of a law enforcer. The brothers were charged with possession of burglary tools, and the younger brother and the friend were also charged with obstruction of justice. Defense attorneys for the 3 boys tried to have the murder charges dropped, alleging that not enough evidence existed to prove who was driving and whether they had deliberately aimed for Officer Brotherson, and although those motions were denied, the Boggs brothers and their friend were all prosecuted in the juvenile system. Ultimately, each admitted guilt to most or all of their crimes in exchange for a plea agreement. The friend, by then 16, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, while 14-year-old Lawrence Boggs pled guilty to second-degree felony manslaughter, claiming that he had been riding in the back seat when the chase occurred. His 15-year-old brother Christopher admitted to a slew of other charges the 3 had stemming from that night, but none directly related to the car striking Officer Brotherson. He read a statement in court saying in part, quote, "I will never get over this, hurting your family so much. I wish I could go back in time to erase all this pain I've caused to you guys." Prosecutors countered the defense attorney's claims that this was an accident, saying, quote, "Accidents are things you can't foresee that happen. This was an inevitable circumstance that happened as a result of all of their choices. Their choices to engage in gang activity, where they were routinely stealing vehicles and fleeing from officers. It became a culture." When sentenced the following summer, all 3 were sent to secure care facilities with the intent of keeping them there until their 21st birthdays, in addition to 1,000 hours of community service for one of them and 2,000 hours each for the other 2. Lawrence Boggs' defense attorney called Officer Brotherson's killing a, quote, "tragedy for everyone involved and a tragic accident," although that's tough to accept when you understand that, at the time of their sentencing, none of the 3 teens had ever even seen a picture of Cody Brotherson. Here's the defense attorney David Brown, who had this to say in part following their sentencings.
I think that he needs to pay the piper. I mean, he's a backseat passenger in a car that hit Officer Brotherson. And again, I wish everyone would have an opportunity to see this video, and I know that you probably won't unless it's released. But from the point that the spike strip is going out there, which it couldn't have been on the street more than 4 seconds before he's hit. So the reaction time, you have an inexperienced driver, not my client, going 70 miles an hour. He's trying to react. He's already run over a spike strip. So it's an accident. It's a tragic accident. And that's why it was pled down as a reckless incident.
Judge Kimberly Hornack told all 3 of the juvenile defendants to look at a picture of the man whose death they caused, and to think of him every day forever, and to think of him whenever they thought about taking part in gang activity or committing a crime, whenever they saw a police car or a 25-year-old man for the rest of their lives. She ordered them to read the dozens of pages of victim impact statements written by Officer Brotherson's family and friends, saying that, quote, "We are here to learn about your future, but this is more about Officer Brotherson than you. He died trying to protect the safety and well-being of the citizens of Utah, citizens like you." West Valley Police Chief at the time, Lee Russo, addressed the media that day, saying in part,
"Cody was the kind of police officer that every community wanted and every police department needed. We have to believe in our justice system, but is there any punishment that's just in a case like this? In my personal opinion, no. This doesn't fit the crime that occurred. This doesn't pay for the loss that we've all suffered. But there's been a lot of question raised about, do we need to go back to the legislature? Should we have discussions about enhanced penalties? Absolutely, I believe that. I do believe that there should be some enhancements. There should be some level of protection for police officers when something like this happens. You know, the question was raised where one of the defense attorneys actually began to speak about the consequences and talking about this being an accident. I think he posed that question. You know, there were red and blue flashing lights all up and down that street that night. I do believe being able to identify and convict criminals, making it more certain that when people engage in criminal behavior that we can identify who they are and hold them accountable, get them convicted and put them in jails, I think that has a deterrent effect. I think that will lower crime. This is something we'll never get over. This is just simply something that we're going to get used to. But truly, I do believe, even in Cody's death, he's brought a community together. He's brought a police department together, and a community I think that was at times, struggling with its police department only but a few years ago. I think this has served to remind people, how important this police service is and what the value of what these men and women do every day.
Officer Brotherson's mother also felt that her son's death was no accident and that juvenile sentences were a joke here, saying that, quote, "If you intentionally murder a police officer or kill a police officer during the act of a crime, you deserve to face adult consequences." She vowed to try and help change the way Utah prosecuted juveniles who killed a police officer, staunchly against any kind of short juvenile sentence. To mostly everyone's dismay, both Boggs brothers were released early after they were involved in fights in juvenile detention, getting them sent into the adult system from which they were released early. The younger Boggs picked up an assault by a prisoner charge in November 2018 when he was at the Mill Creek Youth Detention Center in Ogden, Utah, and was sent to adult prison for it. He received a sentence of 0 to 15 years for the assault and was set to be paroled on October 6, 2020, but was instead paroled on May 28, 2020, quote, due to COVID-19 safety measures. Christopher Boggs picked up his assault by a prisoner charge in January 2020 after he turned 18, following a violent group fight in his facility's gym. He was sent to prison with a sentence of 120 days in jail with a 55-day credit. He was released on probation early due to COVID as well on April 18, 2020, just weeks before his younger brother. Bringing charges on the brothers in the adult system while they were in youthful detention essentially canceled out their juvenile court sentences. And this is the issue that Officer Brotherson's mother would eventually help eradicate in Utah. This episode is brought to you by MyFitnessPal. A brand new year is right around the corner, but as I'm trying to remind myself, getting healthier and fitter doesn't have to be a first of the week or first of the year thing. And with MyFitnessPal, you can learn what can work, especially for you. There's no rigid diet plan, just the chance to learn what to do and how to do it to get you on track toward an overall healthier body. A MyFitnessPal premium membership goes even further, offering the custom tools and expert guidance that could be exactly what catapults you toward your health and fitness goals. With MyFitnessPal, you're getting a community as well, with support from other users, so whatever you need to be successful, there's someone there to help. The guided fitness and nutrition plans are always there for us as well for when we want a bit more structure, so you will never feel like you're going at this alone. MyFitnessPal does way more than just count calories. Get the support you need to meet your health goals. Start your premium membership today. Go to warbaby.myfitnesspal.com and use code WARBABY to get a 1-month premium membership for free. That's warbaby.myfitnesspal.com, code WARBABY for a free 1-month premium membership. warbaby.myfitnesspal.com. So, within 3.5 years or so of Officer Brotherson's death, 2 of the 3 perpetrators in the crimes that took his life were out of secure custody, allowed to leave because they were within 180 days of their scheduled release dates as the pandemic intensified. By the summer, they were back in the spotlight again when on Saturday, July 13th, 2020, a shooting occurred at the Extended Stay Motel in West Valley around 3:30 a.m. When police arrived, most of the roughly 40 people in attendance had scattered, but it was soon determined that newly released 17-year-old Lawrence Boggs had been there at a party, then encountered a different group with which an argument took place. He reportedly left and returned with his friends, engaging in a presumably gang-related shootout that left another 17-year-old critically wounded. Investigators hadn't caught up with Boggs to charge him with inciting a riot before officers encountered him about 48 hours later, when they responded to a thought-to-be-related shooting not too far away. A stolen Lexus was pulled over for having a shot-out back windshield and for going over 100 miles per hour. Inside the car, they found freshly released 18-year-old Christopher Boggs at the wheel and his younger brother critically wounded in the back seat, having been shot multiple times in the neck and torso himself. Uninjured 14 and 17-year-olds were also in the car. The older Boggs brother was arrested on theft charges and probation violations while his brother underwent surgery, ultimately recovering from his wounds. A little more than 6 months later, in February 2021, 39-year-old Lamont Brown was charged in the teenager's shooting with 3 counts felony discharging a firearm causing serious injury counts with gang enhancements, along with felony possession of a firearm by a restricted person. Brown was on federal probation for another shooting when he shot Boggs and had just been arrested and released for violating. Charging documents allege that, while following the brothers so he could shoot them, they figured it out and ended up tailing him into an alley, where he ran and hid in some bushes. When Lawrence Boggs exited his vehicle and approached Brown's car, the man lunged from the bushes and shot the teen in the neck. When others in the car tried to approach Boggs so they could help him, Brown would reportedly shoot him again, leaving him riddled with bullets and needing to have a kidney removed. He was in a coma for several weeks and has injuries from which he will never fully recover. But he's alive, and his family and friends can see him, touch him, and talk to him. For those that loved Officer Cody James Brotherson, there are only memories and the constant desire to keep his name in people's mouths, lest we forget his heroic sacrifice. Utah has since enacted legislation to keep some juvenile offenses out of adult court altogether, which would have helped to keep at least the younger Boggs in the secure care facility after his fight. Legislation signed on March 11, 2021 by Utah Governor Spencer Cox, titled HB 67, is designed to ensure that juvenile sentences are still honored, even if the youthful offender is convicted of offenses in adult court while serving his juvenile sentence. Cody Brotherson's next younger brother, Braden, followed in the fallen officer's footsteps by graduating from the police academy himself in the spring of 2018, going on to take a job as a corrections officer. Officer Brotherson's name lives on. Within days of his death, the Utah 1033 Foundation scholarship bearing his name was created and is awarded to, quote, students who excel in both academics and leadership experience in their communities. The section of road on which the officer died was rededicated as Cody Brotherson Parkway 1 year after his death, and on November 6, 2020, 4 years after his death, a fallen officer memorial was erected in front of West Valley City's public safety building, with Officer Brotherson's name and end of watch date the only entry etched upon it.
Oscar 444 from dispatch. Oscar 444 from dispatch. Officer Cody Brotherson was senselessly and suddenly killed while serving his community of West Valley City in the early morning hours of November 6, 2016. Cody's personality, his passion for the job, and his work ethic exemplified the traits that every officer should have. With a quick smile, a witty joke, or a prank, Cody made fast friends with all those who surrounded him. He had the uncanny ability of reaching beyond his badge to touch the lives of the citizens of the city he loved. Cody, your brothers and sisters in Blue and West Valley will never forget your ultimate sacrifice and will serve proudly in your honor. We are so thankful to call you our brother and our friend, and we will always cherish the short time we had to spend with you. Officer Brotherson, your voice will take it from here. Oscar 444 will now show you 1042 for the last time. It's been a pleasure. End of watch is 1353.